right. Good morning. I'm Fran Gibson. I'm the proud president of Rossmoor Emergency Preparedness Organization. We've been in business here as volunteers for 30 years. In Rossmoor, our core mission, which I try to always keep in mind, is to help educate our close to 10,000 residents on their sole responsibility to get themselves and their households prepared for an emergency, and to help organize our neighbors when we have a shelter-in-place mandatory order. So that's Rossmoor EPO. I am very happy to say that we will be recording this program. Our intrepid EPO high-tech coordinator, Harris Greenberg, edits every recording. We put it up on two places in our EPO world here. It goes on our website, rossmoorepo.org. It also goes on our private branded YouTube channel, where Harris does a fantastic job at adding timestamps, closed captions, and subtitles for those of us in our community who speak English as a second language. So those two modalities are great. The third modality we have this morning, which I am delighted with, is that Channel 28, our new awesome director, George Ivanoff, is seeing fit to try to record if he thinks our meetings have import that go beyond our members, EPO members, and our local neighborhood teams. So he's recorded the last two meetings of ours. We are delighted. We have this morning Red Cross presenting. I don't know any organization we could have gone to, nonprofit, that knows more about disasters and mental health and its impact, the psychosocial impact of disasters on helpers and on the victims of disasters. They worldwide set up shelters, as you know. They have to train their volunteers. 90% of their work is done by the kind of volunteers we have here this morning, Briana Taylor and Cindy Mataraso. So we couldn't have a better group to give us some information on how to stay emotionally sound. Those of you who've worked in disaster relief footprints across the world, and we've got several people in our organization, and CERT has several people in their organization who have much more experience doing that than most of us who are EPO volunteers. I've had the honor and privilege of serving in two disaster relief footprints. One was the Oakland firestorm. And the other one, which really impressed upon me the need for training our volunteers here, was I went to New Orleans twice after Katrina and spent 3 weeks each. And I have to tell you that if you think we're tough and we can put up with anything, we're human. We have reactions and feelings to the devastation and the trauma around us. And it's really important that we get training as helpers so that we're able to help ourselves stay grounded and we're able to help our neighbors remain grounded. It's very important work. And right after I became president of Rossmoor EPO, I asked the board to approve, and they did, a designated director for mental health. And our designated director for mental health is Sharon Meckenstock, and she's marvelous. She's going to be late to the meeting today because she is playing the first half of the COVID Hunger Games, and she's chasing her shot. So let me turn it over now to Harris Greenberg, and he's going to give us the rules so that we can make this meeting work for all of our attendees, be they members or just residents who are interested in this kind of information. Harris, take it away, please.
Yeah. So I guess these days everybody's familiar with Zoom, and when they're Zooming with their friends and in cohorts, they like to put it in gallery mode and have everybody's video thumbnail visible. But because we have so many people in the meeting, we only want to have the recordings with the panelists visible. And so we ask everybody to please turn off their videos, and we're going to automatically mute all of the people who are not presenting. The presenters can unmute themselves, but please keep your videos turned off. You can still participate by submitting your comments or questions to the chat control in Zoom. And Christine Monsen will be watching that, the questions and comments, and she'll summarize them and address them to specific presenters. As Fran said, the meeting is being recorded, and a copy of the video, including closed caption in English and subtitles in actually another 15 languages, will be posted on the EPO website. And Fran, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much, Harris, and thank you for all that you do for us. You're our intrepid high-tech coordinator. He's amazing. Let me very quickly run through a president's report. We recently put up a dues pay button on our website, and we ran into a few problems with our Wix platform. We have to adjust. We have some issues with our application to the feds for our tax exempt ID number, but we'll get that settled out. In the meantime, it is 2021. The work we do is very important to the safety and the well-being and resilience. That's going to be the word of the day today. Resilience of our Rossmoor residents. So go to our website if you are a coordinator or a team member, or if you are a resident who just simply wants to support the work that we're doing. You don't have to be a coordinator. You do not have to serve on an EPO team to be part of what we're doing. Go to our website, rossmoorepo.org, and there is on our homepage a button where you can check in with our wonderful treasurer, Mary Spear, so you can update your dues, and it's a whopping $5 a year. So we appreciate your going and doing that. It's great. Please help us out. Harris Greenberg is collating our two sets of books and is adding some tabs and filters. There's going to come a time when I think we'll just have one set of books is our goal here. And with the tabs and the filters, we'll be able to, I can pull up the coordinators, our radio comms people can pull up their FRS operators. This is going to simplify where we're going. Harris, Pat Hutchison, and Ralph Anthenian. Pat is our website designer. Ralph is our content manager of our website. The four of us will work together over the next week or two to get a update button going where we'll send out I'll ask Marcia McLean, our email blaster, to send out an update request, and you'll go in and just update your information. If we can do that as a first shot, that will be great. We also have Eric Cox and Amal Molik have kindly updating those of our in our membership and our coordinators who perhaps do not have an email address, and so we can only reach them by telephone. George Ivanoff has asked our new director of Channel 28 has asked Rossmoor EPO to host tomorrow night of bingo night, and we have accepted. I have accepted, and Marcia McLean, who is the coordinator of Rossmoor area CERT, is going to join me in hosting that. We'll do that tomorrow night. I think that's great because, again, we can reach more people that way. George tells me maybe 1,200 people, perhaps more, play bingo every month. So for us to be able to reach those people is great. Marcia and I worked out a slideshow on our missions, so we're going to be ready to go tomorrow night. Our blood program lead, Colene Trinterud, is valiantly trying to meet every challenge thrown at her here in terms of locations of our quarterly blood drives. Our next quarterly blood drive is February 12th, and in a minute, I'll turn it over to Colleen to update us on how that is going. She's doing a wonderful job. Next month's meeting was going to be on caregivers. We're going to have to pivot a little. I don't have an announcement about that today. We have one of our speakers has fallen ill with COVID. So Carol Harper, who is president of the Companions Club here in Rossmoor, was going to join this other speaker. I'm not certain what we'll do. I'll worry about that after this meeting today. We'll get something going. Our April meeting will probably be, I'm asking 3 local model programs that'll include Harris Greenberg's to give us an idea of how it is that you took the guidebook and animated it and put together a program at the local level. So Colleen, back to you now. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Fran, and I want to thank EPO and the GRF for sponsoring the American Red Cross drives here in Rossmoor. Blood donations are a community responsibility, And while you're reading this, in our area, someone needs blood. Blood is needed every 2 seconds. About 1 in 7 people entering a hospital need blood, and blood cannot be manufactured. And only 37% of our country's population is eligible to give blood, and then less than 10% of those who can donate actually do annually. It's the gift of life, so be a hero and give blood, please. Those of you that are already signed up have been receiving cancellations here in Rossmoor, and then sign-ups, and then another cancellation, and then another sign-up. This is what's been happening. We had our January 6th one in the fireside room, and we had a communication problem and didn't know that they were putting in a brand new HVAC system. And it was absolutely freezing in there. So the phlebotomist said, we're going to have to cancel. We did get six units of blood before it happened, but we had to cancel that. So then they went over and they looked through the event center, and that was going to be great. We got all signed up for that. So in the meantime, we had to cancel. The way the system goes, you have to cancel everybody out and then re-enter them in again. So we did that for the event center. And then luckily and very wonderfully, we have Kaiser and Red Cross, John Muir coming in to give our vaccines. So then again, we're having to cancel everybody and then re-enter everybody again. So when you're getting all of these notifications, have heart, we're making it. Anyway, so right now on February 12th, we're going to be in the Diablo room. And so there we are. The good news is that for the 3 that we have had already, the 3 blood drives that we have, we've collected over 70 units of blood. That's really phenomenal. So all drives are now open for sign up, and February 12th is scheduled for the Diablo room, as I said, on the Hillside Complex. So far for the rest of the year, as you can see, we don't have them up. Yes, we do. Down at the bottom of this screen on the sign up that Harris has here, they are all going to be in the event center, barring any further vaccines and that type of thing. So if you get the cancellations, please just know that confirmation is going to be coming right behind us. But part of the problem is because we had to change the date also, not everybody can do it. So we had everybody signed up for January 6th and it went to the 12th, and not everybody can do it. So at this point, we have about 12 more people that we need to sign up for whole blood, and 2 more power reds for the February 12th. April 21st to sign up. We have 20 more signups for them, and the 30th and October 8th are open now and on the sign up screen. So please do go to your www.redcrossblood.org, and in place of the zip code, please note that we're now Rossmoor CA. And then that takes away people going to Southern California and signing up for the Southern California Rossmoor that they were doing before. Briana, my mentor over there, is just laughing. Okay, there's one additional thing that if you can see this little sign, John and I had our vaccines done the other day. So now when you go, they want to know which vaccine that you've had. If you have the Pfizer or the Moderna, there's no wait time. And as far as I know in this area, that's all that we have. But if you down the road, when we have some of the others, there may be a 2-week wait time, or if you don't know, a 4-week wait time. So just be aware that when you go, please take your card that you get when you get your vaccine. I just want to thank everybody for listening to this, and hopefully more and more people will sign up and be a first-time donor. We have 10,000 people here, and we would love to do it even more than quarterly. There's a huge need for blood. And if you have any questions at all, my name and number is there. Please give me a call. Believe me, I've been getting a lot of calls with these cancellations and re-signups. They say, what is going on? That's what's going on. So the other thing is, please do go to the tip sheet that we have put on the Rossmoor EPO.org website, and it tells you things that will make you a lot more comfortable when you go. So just thank you everyone for your support, and giving blood is truly a gift of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for doing a masterful job at pivoting and meeting every challenge thrown at you. You're doing a wonderful job at this, and we're deeply, deeply grateful to you. I'd like to introduce Dennis Bell next. Dennis is Rossmoor's Public Safety Manager, as most of you know. Dennis has been here since 2009, and for many of us, sadly, is retiring after 12 years of service. He's done a marvelous job of keeping our vulnerable senior community safe. And Dennis has a very special guest this morning he'd like to introduce. So I'm not going to introduce the special guest. I would like to let Dennis do that. Welcome, Mr. Bell. Gosh, this is one of the last meetings we'll see you. So I'm always a bit sad. Welcome.
Thank you for the intro, Fran. And I want to thank Fran and her EPO team, Harris and Christine, for putting this together. It's a wonderful forum for us. And I'd like to welcome our Red Cross partners. Briana has been a wonderful partner, not only for the Rossmoor residents, but for GRF. And I consider Briana a friend. She's been so supportive. I haven't had the pleasure to meet Cindy, but in a good way, her reputation precedes her. So I look forward to her presentation. And of course, Colleen representing Red Cross and the Rossmoor residents for blood drive. It's all very critical. Before I give you a GRF update, I'd like to take a minute just to introduce the new face on the EPO. Tom Cashion is going to be my successor, and he doesn't start work till Monday the 8th, but Tom was chomping at the bit to start getting to know what's going on here. And instead of waiting until March to introduce himself, Tom wanted to take a minute to introduce himself to the EPO group. And he'll be a regular participant starting in March. Tom?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Actually, I was on your show about 3 months ago, and I was actually an officer then, and now I'm retired. At least for one more week, I'm retired, and then I come out of retirement to be your guys' public safety manager. And gotta say, I'm really looking forward to it. I gotta thank Dennis. Dennis has been wooing me to take on this position for many years, and I'm glad we were actually able to make it work. And Dennis and I will be overlapping for a couple months so he can show me the ropes. And like I already said, I'm really excited to work closely with you guys as we move forward to make Rossmoor an even safer community. So good morning, and thank you for having me.
Welcome, Tom.
Tom's going to be a wonderful fit with his experience at Walnut Creek PD. He's going to be a great fit. And in March, Tom will give you a much more in-depth bio, but I look forward to working with Tom. And Tom and I have been talking about this job for the last couple of years, kind of preparing where we're going in the future. My last day is actually April 1st, and I'm not fooling about that. That's going to be my last, thanks, Christine. That's going to be my last day here at work, but Tom and I will have some time to overlap. For GRF update, as you know, the vaccine clinic started today for the John Muir Health Services, started at the event center. I've been kind of watching the camera at the event center, and people are getting vaccinated, and I see people in the observation room. So that's a big plus. We all need to really thank Tim O'Keefe and the Golden Rain Foundation Board of Directors for really championing this vaccine process in Rossmoor. Tim spent a lot of time with constant steady pressure on the county to make this happen. The board backed him and made things happen. So the community owes a great thanks to Tim O'Keefe and the Golden Rain Foundation Board of Directors for putting this together. John will be working here for the next couple of weeks. They figure they can get everybody vaccinated, John Muir Health members and non-Kaiser members in Rossmoor, 75 and older. Then they'll return to do the second dose. Kaiser would like to start. They do not have the vaccines right now. John Muir gets their vaccines from the county. Kaiser is a big machine and they get their vaccine allotments directly from the state, and it's slowed down some. As soon as Kaiser can get the vaccines, they will open up a clinic for Kaiser members in Rossmoor, again, 75 and over. Please remember, if you already have a vaccine scheduled somewhere else, follow through with that. Don't cancel it to wait for the Rossmoor vaccine. That's really important because the numbers are based on those that did not have vaccines already or did not have appointments. So please do that. A Nixle came out last week on, was it Friday morning, that upset the residents that the public safety office is going to be closed. I can't go into details why. It's a small office and it's some personnel matters involved with there. I can tell you the community is not at risk for anything. The office is going to have to be closed. I have some people working remotely to take care of RFID tags. We will not be able to issue identification cards probably until at least February 10th, but other things are working behind the scenes to make things happen. So know if your RFID tag's expiring in January or February, it will be updated. With that, we're still in the purple tier. It doesn't really change much for what we're doing here at GRF as far as what facilities are open. If it moves to the next lower tier, there'll be some changes, but again, we work on the state guidelines and follow those. Finally, again, I think we owe Tim O'Keefe thanks for being a really strong leader during this pandemic. It's been about a year now. Tim has really taken the lead and done things, I think, that really protected the community. And again, Tim could not have done that without the consent and support of the Golden Rain Foundation directors, board of directors, having to make some really tough, not popular decisions for the community, but everything we have done, GRF has done, has been in the best interest of the community, and that will not change for the duration of this pandemic. With that, everybody stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you all again in March. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, and welcome, Tom. Welcome. Let me make an announcement following Dennis's report on the vaccines and COVID that I want our members and residents to know. It's become a new best practice, given that we have 3 variants that seem to be galloping slowly but surely through our country. Variants to the original coronavirus problem. They're recommending that we begin to wear double mask. And so I want to encourage you, if you're an EPO coordinator, to encourage your residents to consider doing that. Vin Gupta, who is a pulmonologist at University of Washington's Metric and Health Evaluation, I don't have the exact title, but he's amazing. He recommends cord locks for those of us cheap like me who are not going to go to KN95 masks. I'm going to keep my cloth masks, and I have taken my cloth masks where I can and put cord locks on them. So these can be ordered. They're pretty easy to put on your masks. Your face masks, CDC, or Tony Fauci, not CDC. Tony Fauci is recommending that single layer masks are not going to be helpful with the variants. It's also not a good idea to be wearing bandanas, which are open at the bottom, or filter or 1 layer gaiter masks, they're called. So I want to encourage everybody we'll put this information up on our website. It's very important as we go forward that we stay as safe as we can. Using these cord locks, you use that on your cloth face mask, tighten them as much as you can, and then put another mask over them. We'll do it. Pat and I and Ralph will post this to our website. I think it's an important enough change in best practices for us to make that announcement. Now I'd like to introduce Briana Taylor and Cindy Mataraso, who are with Red Cross. And again, as I said at the top of the meeting, I can't think of any organization in America better prepared to talk about staying emotionally grounded as a helper or as a victim than the American Red Cross. Briana's volunteer extraordinaire. She's just amazing with the American Red Cross, the Northern California coastal region. And she is one of EPO's oldest and most treasured community partners. I don't know how many years EPO has worked with her, but we know we've worked for a long time. So we're delighted that she is here. And Cindy Mataraso. Cindy manages disaster mental health, the Red Cross, and is Director of Clinical and Behavioral Services for Crestwood Behavioral Health in Sacramento. Her specialty, among several, is trauma-informed care. It's one of her clinical interests, and she treasures evidence-based care and best practices, and lets those guide her clinical work. Briana and Cindy will be doing a presentation today on ways we can stay emotionally sound and we can build our own resilience, which we would need as our response to a disaster here, just as a resident, but also if we want to be helpers. So I'm going to turn it over to Briana and Cindy, and thank you very much for coming and for participating with this vital information.
Well, thank you so much, Fran. Let me bring this up. I want to thank you for having the Red Cross back again to speak with all of you. And I also, as Fran said, you know, the key word is resilience. And as Colleen talked about the blood drives, thank you for your resilience in putting up with these cancellations and rescheduling. And thank you, Rossmoor, for donating blood, because without you, we can't meet the needs in our community. So, and I also want to thank Colleen for taking this on at Rossmoor and doing this. Want to welcome Tom. We're happy to have you here, Golden Rain and Rossmoor. We look forward to working with you. Before I get going, I would really like to let everybody at Rossmoor know that in December, our Contra Costa Red Cross Leadership Council hosted their 4th annual partner recognition. And it's a recognition where we honor those partners who've helped us deliver our mission during the past year. One of our honorees was your very own Dennis Bell, who has been such an amazing partner to Red Cross for all the time that he's been here. And I've worked with Dennis over those years. Dennis did a shelter drill here where we partnered together with Walnut Creek also to teach residents about how would we shelter in a disaster. We formed a Rossmoor Red Cross Club at one time. Dennis was instrumental in getting a memorandum of understanding through with Red Cross. And he's just been, you have been so lucky to have him. Tom, you've got big shoes to fill, but Dennis says you're up to the task. So I want to thank Dennis once again. We will miss you very much. And Tom, we look forward to working with you. So on with, I thought what I would do, I've been here talking to you all for many years about disasters. And so I thought today I'd kind of set the stage for Cindy to talk about how do we take care of ourselves during a disaster. And so I thought I'd backtrack a little bit and talk about what Red Cross is all about. We think of blood, we think of disasters, but we do a lot more than that also. And since our very founding in 1881 by Clara Barton, our focus has remained the same. The American Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. We know that during a disaster, sometimes simply a hot meal served to victims, blood when it's needed most, shelter when there's nowhere else to go, and an emergency message delivered to a member of our armed forces from their family are just some of the things that can make people's lives so much easier. There are 7 principles with the Red Cross, and these are actually the reasons why I joined the Red Cross back in 2000, right after Hurricane Katrina. First of all, the Red Cross is a nonprofit humanitarian organization. We have a congressional charter. We are not part of our government, though. We are separate from the government, and we are guided by these 7 fundamental principles. And in this day and age, these principles never get old, and they are at the core of what we do. And as I said, This is why I've been a volunteer for all these years. Red Cross is about humanity. We're there to meet a person's basic human needs when they need it most. Impartiality. We're here to help anyone and everyone. Neutrality. We do not choose sides. We do not take a stand. Independence. The Red Cross isn't a federal agency. We maintain our own separate identity from the US government. Now, that's good and that's bad. It's good because the government doesn't tell us what to do, but it's bad because we receive very little, if any, funding from the US government. So all of our funding comes from the generosity of the American public. Volunteer service. 94% of our workforce at the Red Cross is made up of volunteers like Cindy and myself. Unity. There can only be one Red Cross or one Red Crescent Society in any one country. It must be open to all, and it must carry on its humanitarian work throughout its territory. Universality. Red Cross societies from across the world come together as one to restore humanity and provide relief. All Red Cross societies worldwide share the same responsibility to help people. And as I say, these are not just words on a page. They're what we live by at Red Cross. I'd like to talk for a moment about our vision. You know, our mission describes what we do, but our vision describes our aspirations. And the important part of all of this is that we aspire to turn compassion into action. Now, that's been a lot more difficult during COVID, and we'll talk about why that is in a moment. But all people affected by disaster across the country and around the world receive care, shelter, and hope. That's anywhere around the world. Our vision is that our communities are ready and prepared for disasters. Everyone in our country has access to safe, blood-saving, life-saving blood and blood products. All members of our armed forces and their families find support and comfort whenever needed, and in an emergency, there will always be trained individuals nearby, ready to use their Red Cross skills to save lives. So let's bring that a little bit closer. So we're a part of the Northern California coastal region. And in our region, we serve 15 different counties, ranging from north all the way to Sonoma. East, we go all the way into San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Merced. And south, we go all the way through Monterey County. So our services include just what we talked about in our vision: preparedness and health and safety services, biomedical services, disaster services, which is what I'm a part of, service to the armed forces, and international services. So let's take a look at what Red Cross has been doing this last year. These are some of the numbers in our region, and I apologize that they're small, so I'll kind of go over them. Our year ranges from June 30th to the following July 1st to the following June 30th. So in this past year in our region, which remember almost all, a large portion of that year was during COVID, we still collected 38,000 units of blood. We reached out to 400 youth through our pillowcase project, and this was a time when schools weren't in session. 1,800 people were taught preparedness on our online Be Red Cross Ready program, not in person like we've normally done. Many of our classes now we put online, and we'll talk about that later. Our in-person response, which requires our Red Crossers to undergo a health and safety screening to keep not only our volunteers safe, but our clients safe. And all of a sudden we were donning PPE, personal protective equipment. We looked a lot different during disasters than we did in the past. And our DAT responders, which are our disaster action team responders, They're the volunteers that are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and respond to home fires. All of a sudden now, they were conducting things virtually, and also working with our disaster mental health, our caseworkers, and our health services, who were now conducting interviews with our clients over the phone. A very different way of doing business than we've done in the past. You know, last year I came out and talked to you about the wildfires, and I think it was in September when the wildfires were still pretty new. And so just a little update. I think at that time I'd just come off of a deployment. And after that, I was deployed 2 more times to those wildfires. That's how long they went on and how big and intense the response was. But during that response, Red Cross with our partners sheltered around 110,000 people with overnight stays in hotels or shelters. Majority of them were in hotels. We provided more than 95,000 meals serving those wildfire evacuees. We gave out nearly 10,000 emergency supply kits, which included toiletries or cleanup kits, and provided more than 860 Red Cross responders deploying to that disaster. Majority of them came from the Northern California coastal region, but we had to reach out to other areas on the Pacific, our Pacific division, and some even worked virtually from Massachusetts, from Pennsylvania, Alaska. We had people from all over assisting us in this. That's the benefit and the beauty of Red Cross, is that when we can't handle something locally, it's too big. We can pull from Red Cross volunteers all around the country. And I just wanted to mention that during these wildfires, think about all that was going on last fall. We had wildfires in Southern California. We had wildfires in Oregon. We had wildfires in the state of Washington. We had hurricanes going on the East Coast. And Red Cross was responding to all of these disasters at the same time. It always amazes me how Red Cross pulls together, and the commitment of the volunteers to step up in a COVID environment and do what's needed to do to help our community during these disasters, even when they're happening all together. I just wanted to also give you a quick update that we've also been responding to the evacuation of some 15,000 people in the Central Coast due to last week's really dangerous, wet and windy storms in Northern California. We opened up several temporary evacuation points. We have provided more than 1,200 overnight stays in hotels to people who have been evacuated. I'm so happy to say that as of this morning, we are down to 8 hotel rooms and 8 clients who have not been able to return yet to the Dolan Fire burn scar area because the evacuation order has not been lifted. And we're hoping that that order is lifted by Monterey County today. We've also provided 2,500 meals and snacks to those that were evacuated. So again, another large response, and I'm currently deployed on that response, but I have people covering me today so I can be here with all of you. So that's a little bit about what's going on with Red Cross now. And I just wanted to say, you know, emergencies don't stop just because we're in a pandemic, and neither does Red Cross. So even in the face of the coronavirus, families still depend on us every day. The need is constant, considering that more than 30,000 people a day around the country on an average receive Red Cross support. So COVID-19 has not changed the mission that we do, but it has certainly changed the way we do the mission. So I'd just like to go over those 5 different lines of service that Red Cross has and talk a little bit about them for a moment and how we've had to adjust what we do in every line of service because of COVID. So disaster relief. We now put people in hotel rooms rather than sheltering them because of social distancing. We want to keep people as safe as possible, and we want them to know that Red Cross is a safe place to come to for help when they need it. So we've done a lot of training this past year about how would we shelter people if we need to, because we know in large evacuations, we may need to shelter people. And that is what we needed to do during the wildfires. So we actually had a drill in June here in Contra Costa County, working with all our partners, our government partners, public health. One of the City of Concord hosted the drill, working with Animal Services, Medical Reserve Corps, where we could actually practice safety protocol and how to keep everyone safe during a sheltering experience. So we also offer financial assistance, emotional support, and health services. And the way we do a lot of that now is virtually. When we were working in a disaster, one of the most important things was to be able to sit very close to somebody and talk to them and be there with them and help them, put an arm around their shoulder if it was appropriate. But we can't do that now. So we're giving that, we've learned how to deliver a compassionate response to people, but doing it virtually. And it's not been easy because we're used to being right there, right next to somebody. Now we deliver individually packaged meals to people in hotel rooms, rather than having people eat all together in a congregate setting where people could support one another and be there with one another and share stories. And everything we do is about safety, social distancing, following safety guidelines, CDC guidelines, cleaning, sanitizing things, and wearing PPE wherever it's necessary, masking all the time. So disaster relief is really about supporting the community. And in the early days of the pandemic, here in Contra Costa, we were very active supporting our government partners with their alternate care sites. Doing sheltering was not their expertise. So we were the subject matter experts on sheltering and worked with our partners in helping them set up those alternate care sites. We also trained county staff in sheltering. Fortunately, here in Contra Costa County, we've never had to use them. We coordinated with our local fire departments to continue supporting families that were affected by home fires. And we developed a no-touch delivery of financial assistance cards. So our DAT team, Disaster Action Team, would go out to the site of a home fire, meet with the people who had been affected. Sometimes they sat in their cars, in the Red Cross car, doing paperwork so that we could see what kind of assistance was needed by those affected. But now we have a new way of doing that. We still offer financial assistance, and we will deliver that in many different ways without having to actually be there. Or we drop it off somewhere at a safe place and make an exchange of the card with the person. We've also taken a lead in addressing those families who have lost loved ones due to the coronavirus. We have set up virtual family assistance centers around the country. We have a group that works out of Vacaville here in our region. It's a group where we refer people who have lost loved ones to resources who can help them. Our disaster mental health will work with them and talk with them. And it's been just such an important service to those families. You know, we all focus on the lost ones, but those who are still left have incredible difficulties in moving on. So if we can work with them in any way, it's really what we want to do to help. Colene talked a lot about blood services, and I just want to talk about some of the things that we've implemented so that it is safe to go donate blood. Your temperature is taken before you even come into the site. Everybody is wearing face masks, and now we're double masking. Social distancing is maintained. The volume of what we can do in a blood drive is not as high as what it used to be because of all these safety protocol. So it's even more important that you support and donate blood. We're constantly disinfecting surfaces and equipment. We don't take any walk-ins on our blood drives or at our blood service centers any longer. You must have an appointment in advance to give blood. And that's all in a way to help us control and, again, keep not only our staff safe, but everybody donating blood safe. We started testing for COVID-19 antibodies also. So all donated blood is tested for COVID-19, and this service is offered free. It's not a diagnostic test to let you know whether you've had COVID, but it really gives us better insight into our own health. So I just wanted to share that with you. And one of the most important things we're doing now is providing for patients who experience COVID by sharing plasma from people who have had COVID. And this is an effort that was funded by the FDA, and we've been collecting that plasma from individuals. And it contains the COVID-19 antibodies, and it's really helped people who are seriously ill with the virus. So we are reaching out to anybody who has recovered from COVID-19 to share their plasma to help other people. And another thing we're doing that isn't on here is we're doing diversity blood drives. And it's really important because many of our communities, there are many individuals that suffer from sickle cell, and they need that African-American blood, sometimes Hispanic blood, really helps for that. So we're really looking to increase diversity blood drives all around the area. Service to the armed forces is probably one of our best kept secrets. Not everybody knows that we have a group that supports our armed forces. It's a 24/7 group that actually, it's called our Hero Care Center, where anybody from our armed forces or their families can call in for emergency communication. That volume has just become so much greater during this period. We offer online workshops to help families and the military themselves with stress and coping with COVID-19. We deliver pre-deployment briefings, animal visitations, and even more virtually for family members and those deploying. We provide comfort kits with hygiene items to military families who have to shelter in place. We've had a huge group who have been making masks, Red Cross volunteers that we've delivered to our armed forces. And just so you know, we work with our armed forces here in this country, but wherever they go, Red Cross is there to work with them. Here we help them prepare for their military life. We're out there when they're responding. And if you notice, prepare, respond, and recover, those are the pillars of how Red Cross responds during a disaster. So we're there with them as they're responding to disasters, and we're there with them when they come back home. And we're also there supporting their families throughout this whole time, which is really important. Another group that we have is our International Services Group. And during this time, we have been providing some financial contributions to the International Red Cross so they can go out there and get the word through community-based health organizations about hygiene and COVID and all the different things that the areas around the country are dealing with. And if you're interested about that, please go online, Red Cross and Google International Services, and it will tell you specifically what we're doing in every country. We're helping expand case detection with COVID, and we've deployed specialists in mental health, communications, and data management. We also have our preparedness and health safety, and these are probably things that you're very familiar with. In the past, we did these face-to-face, disaster preparedness training, lifeguards, swimming, water safety, babysitting classes. I think that's the first time I ever heard about Red Cross. I took a babysitting class. I know many of you have taken first aid and CPR and AED training. And I just wanted to also mention that we have an app that you can download, which it's preparedness in your pocket. It will alert you to anything any emergencies that are going on in our area. Just go to the App Store or Google Play if you have Android, and you can download one of these many different apps. I know the emergency one is one I have all the time, and I have it set for not only the area here, but I have it set where my kids live. So it gives me alerts on what's going on. I also have the blood donor app that I use all the time, the first aid app, and they're just, I mean, they're so filled with information. So go online and take a look, and please do download those. They're free of charge, and they will really help you to respond during the time of disaster. So I just wanted to go back to training services for just a moment. We've been developing how to do all of our classes online. So right now we're offering our Be Red Cross Ready class online, psychological first aid online, and we continue to offer some of the essential classes like CPR face-to-face, but we include masks, there's social distancing and no physical contact, and those classes are rare. And we've offered 120-day extensions for professional responders with provisional certificates available in the meantime until we can do more face-to-face training again. So let's shift for a moment to the types of disasters that we respond to. It's a list of all the disasters around here. And probably the few that we don't have around here are, we don't have many tornadoes around here, although there have been some. We don't have hurricanes around here, but we do have flooding. We do have transportation disasters. And one of the disasters that most people don't realize that we respond to are the active shooter terrorist mass casualty incidents. And those are some of the most difficult disasters for us to respond to. And we take a very low profile. It's not something that you hear that we're responding to. It's not something that you necessarily see in the news that we're there. But some of the local ones that we've responded to several years ago was Asiana, the airline crash, the Ghost Ship Warehouse, we were there, the Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting. And we provide a safe place for family members of those who were affected to come. We provide disaster mental health. We provide often meals. During the Gilroy Garlic Festival, we actually provided sheltering because there were people who attended the festival who were some of the why is my mind going blank? People who were displaying their goods at the festival, who were from other areas, and when they evacuated, they didn't have car keys, they didn't have wallets, they couldn't go back to go in and get those things. no way they could get home, so we gave them a safe place to stay. So what are some of the things that we provide? Well, we provide food and water, shelter, health services. What we're going to focus on today is disaster and mental health, spiritual care, reunification services. How do you find your loved ones when you don't know where they are and they've been affected? Distribution of relief supplies, information and referrals, recovery casework, and direct financial assistance. The mission of Red Cross Disaster Mental Health is to respond to the psychosocial needs of people affected by the disaster, including Red Cross disaster workers, across the continuum of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. So a little bit about the history. Disaster mental health actually came about because it was our Red Cross volunteers who needed support when they were responding to disasters. And it was established in 1992. And later we realized that not only did our volunteers need disaster mental health, but the people that we were serving in the disasters needed it too. So disaster mental health became a huge and very important part of what we do in Red Cross. So disaster mental health services respond to the immediate emotional needs and distress for, as I say, both volunteers and for our clients. And they mitigate long-term consequences. So we're not the only ones that provide disaster mental health, but we're there to support the other resources in the community in delivering mental health. Often we work with the county behavioral care to come in and help us. And we serve the community in preparedness activities and recovery programs. So I want to talk a little bit about the assumptions for disaster mental health. So most reactions to disaster are common and expected. Most people are resilient and will recover on their own. Disaster mental health interventions can help facilitate recovery and lessen long-term psychological challenges like depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress. Imagine the people right now that we've been serving these last 2 weeks, or less, it seems like 2 weeks, it's only really a week, who had to evacuate their homes because of fires last fall. And now we're facing a second evacuation because of debris flow. The amount of anxiety and stress and PTSD that these evacuees are feeling is just, I can't share with you how hard it is for them. Some clients require more significant emotional support during and after a disaster. So who does disaster mental health for Red Cross? Well, all of our disaster mental health professionals have a master's degree and a current license to practice disaster mental health. They may be social workers, psychologists, professional counselors, marriage and family therapists, psychiatrists, school psychologists, or school counselors. We also work with current psychiatric nurses, and we now have brought back some of our retired mental health professionals. When I came into Red Cross, I'm a psychologist by training, and I came in as disaster mental health during Hurricane Katrina, and then actually started doing external relations. So I'm not working in the mental health area, although it's something that we do as we take care of all our clients all the time. But that's why you have Cindy, who will speak more specifically about everything. But deployed, I work with our disaster mental health teams all the time. So we serve the community members affected by the disaster, and we serve our Red Cross disaster responders. So where do we do this? I mean, when you think about disaster mental health, you think about offices where people used to go, or clinics, and meet with their therapist or their counselor. But not us. During disasters, we provide the service in hotels, if that's where people are sheltering, in shelters. During home fires, it may be provided in their driveway. Temporary evacuation points where people have gone because they've been evacuated. Local assistance centers, which are provided during the recovery phase of a disaster. Often during outreach in communities. And now a lot of it we're doing over the phone. And for our Red Cross responders who are working in the shelters, we've done it in shelters, at our job headquarters. And again, now majority of it is over the phone. So what do they do? So disaster mental health workers provide approved disaster mental health interventions. They help other disaster responders manage their stress while they're working in the disaster environment in consultation with the Red Cross leadership. Because if somebody's having a really difficult time, we might need to remove them from the response so they can take care of their own personal needs. And we're available to assist in all types of responses. And here you can see, this was during the wildfires, one of our disaster mental health having a conversation with one of our evacuees in the shelter. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that disaster mental health is not psychotherapy, and it's not formal mental health evaluations or diagnoses. It's not individual psychological briefings about people, and it's not long-term therapy, trauma therapy. And that's because we only see people on a short-term basis. And building strong therapeutic alliances is not appropriate during a disaster. And some interventions have concerns about efficacy or secondary trauma. And the lack of pre-screening can really be problematic. So some of the factors that affect disaster responders specifically. Working in unfamiliar and challenging settings. It's very hard to be out there at times, seeing the things that you're seeing, and it can be very challenging. We know what the smoke was like during the wildfires last fall, and to be out there in that kind of setting. Many times I would go to my car during the wildfires in the last several years, come out to my car and it would be covered with ash as I would go to the job headquarters. You're also encountering unfamiliar cultural or ethnic populations, which you may not be used to serving, and that can be very stressful. Listening to survivor stories over and over again because they need to tell them over and over again. Seeing disturbing sights. And for responders who travel to a disaster, they leave their families at home and their loved ones to go to the assignment. And so they're there by themselves dealing with everything. Then they return home and there's no way that their families can possibly understand what they've been through during their 2-week deployment or longer. And even now for responders who work virtually, because about 2/3 of our volunteers are working virtually right now. We're working from home, but we're at home, but we're not at home. So you can be at home with the doors closed, but you're not available to your family members. So that can be very stressful. They don't understand. And working from home, somehow you can't get away from the work. It's not like you're leaving the site because you're there where you're always working. So these are factors that really affect our disaster responders that you don't think about. But we're all in this together. And so at this point, what I want to do is turn it over to Cindy, who's going to talk to you more about taking care of yourself so that you can also help take care of those others that you love. So I want to thank you for kind of giving you an overview and putting this in context. So I can turn it over to Cindy at this point. And thank you, Cindy, for being here. Okay, I will stop sharing.
All right. Thank you so very much, Briana. We are so glad that you were able to get time away from your deployment. We appreciate it. And I want to thank Fran and Harris and the entire EPO team. And most importantly, to all of you who are here. It is so exciting to see the amount of energy and engagement that Rossmoor has to prepare for an emergency. I have not been involved with the Red Cross nearly as long as Briana, so I appreciate your overview. My commitment to getting community readiness happened about 8 years ago. By that time, I had already been in community mental health and had much for your service. CERT is another amazing group. As natural disasters in California became increasingly more intense and closer together, we now have fires and disasters that are happening in December. I saw firsthand that communities and individuals were coming together and they were preparing more. People were preparing their go bags and families were having their plans. That's when I decided to start to volunteer with the American Red Cross. And I am in the disaster mental health team. And so I have the honor of being able to support and serve our first responders, our DAT teams, those that are on the front lines, as well as those that are going through a disaster. So Briana did a great job at describing to you what it looks like when there is a disaster and people get displaced. I cannot overestimate enough the impact that this has on workers. People that are responding are hugely impacted. It impacts their mental health. It impacts their well-being. As Briana stated, people are away from home or they are at home, but people are absorbing the sounds. If you're in a fire site, you're absorbing the sounds of crackling trees, the sights, the smells. All of this has a huge impact on somebody's emotional well-being. So as a disaster mental health worker, I am part of a team that when people come back from a deployment, we're checking in with our workers because we know how much they have been impacted. And we are reminding them and connecting with them, allowing them to tell their stories because telling their stories is important. And we're reminding them of their resilience plan. So I'm going to teach you some of the steps that the American Red Cross has come up with to help both those that respond to disasters, but also those that are going through it. By practicing these steps here today, you will be better prepared to help others during a disaster and also to help yourself. Because what you will be doing is you are going to be bolstering your well-being. All right, so what is today about? What today is about is information that largely comes from Red Cross's course called Psychological First Aid. Psychological first aid is the practice of recognizing and responding to people who are experiencing disaster-related stress, including those that are loved ones, neighbors. As Briana said, you might come home from a disaster and your family members don't know what you have been through. They can't imagine. People that are going through a disaster who reach out to their loved ones they might have a hard time understanding. And so psychological first aid allows for that first response for somebody to have a compassionate environment where they can start to process and get grounded to be able to help themselves and be able to manage the impact of the disaster. The information that you will learn today, you'll be able to provide some immediate support and be able to manage stressful situations. All right, and where does it all start? It all starts with you. We are our best buffer for managing and dealing with emergencies. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some terms. First, we're going to talk about your stress response. There's a researcher, Peter Levine, who has coined the term window of tolerance. This is our set point for where we can manage stress optimally. This point kind of ebbs and flows as we go throughout the everyday stressors of our lives. In our window of tolerance, or where our set point is, we can manage things like traffic jams, our phone going off in the middle of a Zoom conversation. We can handle tensions with loved ones. We're able to grab on to our coping skills for the ways that we resolve or we problem solve things, and just have a smooth flow through these experiences. That is our window of tolerance. However, life often throws us curveballs, or our window of tolerance, we get pushed to the edges, or sometimes we even pop out of our window of tolerance. When that happens, our body goes into a natural preservation mode. You may have heard of this as the fight, flight, or freeze. But basically, you are out of that set point, out of your window of tolerance, where your coping mechanisms are taxed, where things are overwhelming. You might even feel threatened. When you get knocked out of your window of tolerance, it has an impact on every part of your body. You experience emotional distress. Your body will go into a response where you will have more cortisol that is being released, where it will impact your perceptions. It impacts your thoughts, and it actually impacts all of your senses, the way you take in visual information, the way you hear things or see things. So you can be greatly impacted on how you just operate and experience the events that are going around you. When you get knocked out of your window of tolerance, it's a biological response. It is not something that you're going to sit on an hour Zoom and hear how to conquer. It is not something that you can overcome by training or life experience. Whether you have been a first responder in your life, or whether you have worked on personal wellness and resilience, that fight or flight response is a biological response. It happens to everybody. That's one of the reasons why the Red Cross realized how important it is to take care of those people that are responding to disasters. And by knowing this stress response, you can better take care of yourself and you can better take care of others during a disaster. All right, so we will go over the fight, flight, or freeze response a little bit later on. But now I want to move on to psychological resilience. Psychological resilience is the ability to bounce back from stressful situations, even in a crisis. Many things impact your resilience. Resilience is something that can be strengthened. It is something that can be built. It is something that as you experience the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, the positives and negatives of life, that you can build upon that. The things that you're going to learn today, you probably have already used. It's probably not going to be anything new. Being able to talk about it and think about it as resilience is going to help you to be able to use it during a disaster, and is going to be able to help you better pull that out of those that you are working with during a disaster. Resilience plays a critical role in facing our everyday stresses, the daily hassles of life. Something that we have all experienced, that we all can relate to, is a traffic jam. So maybe not now so much with COVID, but in the past, I am sure that we have all been in a traffic jam in this lovely Bay Area of ours, where we were late for an appointment, right? In that moment of time, you got stressed, but your resilience allowed you to manage that stress. You probably used skills like keeping things in perspective. You avoided thinking about the situation as something that was insurmountable. And you probably made an action plan and then acted on those. Each one of those things is resilience. So keeping things in perspective allows you to realize that being in a traffic jam is annoying and you don't want to be late for your appointment, but you actually are going to be. By doing this, you avoid thinking about this as an all or nothing situation and making it larger than it needed to be. Because you were able to do that, you probably could come up with some next steps that you could do right there in the moment. Maybe use your speakerphone to reach out to the place that you were going to be late to, let them know, find out if the appointment could be rescheduled, or perhaps even started while you were in the traffic. All of those steps are resilience. And all of those steps, even though you may never have been in a disaster before, you can use those skills when you move into a disaster or when you're helping someone when they're in a disaster. But people don't often recognize that they have these skills, that they have the resilience to manage these situations, these disaster situations where they are overwhelmed, where they have incredible loss, where they have grief and their lives have been tremendously disruptive. So let me give you an example of how disaster mental health works, and something that you certainly can do when you are working with others. So I recently was working with a family, and there were two children in the family, a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. The mother was concerned about her 9-year-old. This family was displaced. They were living in a motel room. They had had a kitchen fire, but their house was not livable, at least for a short period of time. So they were living in this one room in a motel room, and the 9-year-old was experiencing a lot of distress. And so the mother and I did some talking. I first tended to the mother and I tapped into her resilience. I gave her lots of validation for the situation that she was in. And then we talked about her daughter, which was causing her lots of distress. It turns out her daughter was quite resourceful, but her daughter wasn't able to do the things that she liked doing, coloring, reading, listening to her music. In talking with her mom, she realized that her daughter was very attached to a beanbag chair that the daughter has in her room. And that's often where she would do a lot of these de-stressing activities. The mother was actually able to go back into the house, get the beanbag chair, bring it to the motel room. And although the room was quite small, it helped the daughter quite a bit. That beanbag chair, something that was comforting, something that was part of the daughter's routine and habit of wellness, allowed the mother to more easily coach the daughter to do some of those things that helped the daughter to de-escalate a little bit. The mother and I also spoke quite a bit about how to keep her kids connected with routines. Routines are very important, and where you can to help yourself and others maintain those routines. It might be watching a show together that you all used to do before you were displaced. It might be a certain meal. It might be connecting with a community group, but routines can be tremendously comforting. Okay, now moving on. How do we build some of these resilience skills? These 10 things that I'm going to go over are not the only ways to build resilience. These are things that the Red Cross has developed for psychological first aid. They are things that you can use and things that you can help the people that you are working with at the time. But these are by no means an exhaustive list of resilience. Everybody has resilience. Everybody has the ability to build upon the resilience. So the first thing to do is to think about making connections with others. People have natural supports. These natural supports might be the obvious: family, neighbors, friends, but they also might be the less obvious. They also might be things like a hobby that somebody was involved in. For the family that I just mentioned, her and her daughters did hula dancing. And although she would not have identified the people in her hula dancing group as resources, she did re-engage with that activity with her daughters, and it was tremendously helpful. So think about where it is appropriate to use those natural resources to get people connected and or reconnected. Another thing about connections is people might want to get connected with things that they are not typically connected with. I sometimes see this where people want to get connected with their religion, with somebody in a spiritual faith-based community, when that's not something that they usually did in their daily routine. So think about other places that might be natural places of connection, even though the person may not already have an established relationship there. There are many, many places to get people connected with spiritual care. There are spiritual care providers that are connected with fire departments, with the Red Cross, and certainly our religious organizations in our community are available to reach out to people in disasters as well. Help somebody avoid seeing a crisis as insurmountable, while at the same time, people have experienced tremendous loss in a disaster. They might be very disoriented, dysregulated, living in different places. Helping somebody to find those parts of the disaster or the emergency that can be managed can help them to translate that and generalize that to other parts of the situation. Help somebody not to see it as impacting their entire life. Sometimes I might ask people to tell me about other aspects of their life, things that were not impacted by the disaster. I do this not to minimize anybody's experience, because we certainly don't want to do that, but to help somebody to get connected and see that there's still balance and that they can work to repair and put their lives back together. One way in doing that is through acceptance. And of course, accepting things like the loss of a home, a loss of a community, is a tremendous thing to accept. The loss is real, the grief is real, people are overwhelmed. And if people can accept that change is a part of life, accept what has happened in the disaster, then they can move into a place of problem solving or developing goals. Because somebody accepts an emergency, a disaster, a loss in their community, it does not mean that they like it, that they agree with it, or that grieving isn't needed. The grieving part is distinctly separate and different from accepting that a disaster has happened. Again, if you can accept the disaster, if you can accept the loss, the person can move through a place of grief and can move through decision making and putting goals in place that will help them to put their life back together. Sometimes when I'm helping people with goals, you have to break things down. It can be way too much to look at a disaster, a loss of a home, and try to put the whole thing together at once. So I really work with people to put things into categories or to organize it in ways that are manageable. Some people have resources that allow them to look at the big picture and be able to do lots of things at once. And some people need to look at smaller pieces. That's part of what I'm doing with someone when I am working with them during a disaster, is helping to make things manageable for them. So for the family that I mentioned earlier, we had to break things down into small parts. When the mom was working with her children around the relocation and how that impacted their daily life, she was doing that and only that. When she moved into dealing with her house and the repairs of her house, we put a list together and she bit off of that list what she felt was manageable. It is then very important to take those decisive steps and to take action. But just because you know what to do doesn't mean that you can do it. So someone might know what to do, but not have the internal or external resources to do that. So sometimes problem solving is needed to help somebody. Maybe someone needs to be connected with a resource in their community. Maybe someone needs to jump over the hurdle and dive into insurance or putting their family back together. It is important to recognize what resources somebody needs to put those goals into action, and not just assume that if somebody has goals that they are able to take those action steps. You can build upon people's previous resilience. People have been through challenging situations. People have managed hard times in their life. Sometimes talking about what got them through is going to give you some insight into how you might be able to help them, what resources you might be able to direct them to, what resilience they already have that they can build upon. Okay. We can also help somebody look at the higher meaning. Again, you don't want to do this in a way that is minimizing of people's experience. You don't want to say things like, what doesn't kill you is going to make you stronger. But if people start to give you experiences in their past about how challenges have helped them in their future, to be more appreciative of their communities, to have more gratitude, you can start to make those connections in this situation as well. It is many, many times that people will get through a disaster and they will feel more connected to humanity, to their friends and family, to their community, People often have tremendous gratitude for those that have helped them and will want to pay that forward and become helpers in the future. People often will come through emotional distress and have an increased sense of self-worth or have a more developed sense of spirituality or heightened appreciation. Sometimes when I'm working with people and they have a sense of just being so overwhelmed, I might look for things that they're telling me in our conversation, for things that they're grateful for. And I might ask them questions about that, because through that gratitude, people might be able to get to a place of self-discovery or of appreciation, one of connection, where then they are able to work and be able to more effectively work on some of the things that are needed to manage the disaster and to help those around them. Nurturing a positive view of yourself can be very challenging when you are overwhelmed, when you have lost your home, when you're possibly displaced or living in a shelter. Finding where you are resilient, finding where you are meeting the demands of a situation can be very challenging for people. That is where you come in. Having conversations with people, providing that compassionate environment, that compassionate conversation, you can help people to identify and nurture their sense of efficiency, of effectiveness, of where they are managing a tremendously challenging situation in effective ways. I will often point out to people that when people experience a disaster, that doing everyday tasks is tremendously more challenging. I think we could all think about for ourselves at the beginning of COVID, just going to the grocery store required an incredible amount of energy, where in the past, it might have been something that we did habitually and didn't give it much thought. Help people to try to keep things in perspective. Again, we do this in a kind, nurturing way and in a way that does not minimize the situation. Keeping a perspective can allow people to look at things and be able to put goals into place and to take action items. I will sometimes ask people about different situations that are happening, just to be able to help them to get a bigger perspective. I might ask them about their pets and ways that they are caring for their pets, or the ways that they are managing meals, small things, but it helps to keep some perspective. I also help people to keep perspective, and you can help people to keep perspective by honing in on relationships. Often at times of loss, people might want to put their lives back together, re-engage with their homes, their living situations. This is tremendously important, but it's also very important for people to be able to care for themselves and their loved ones. So sometimes pointing that out and asking people specific questions about how they're sleeping, if they're finding time, if they have a pet, if they're finding time to be with their pet or be with their loved ones, might connect people back to that perspective of family and relationships. As much as possible, help people to maintain a hopeful outlook. And this can be tremendously challenging, but an optimistic outlook can enable the unexpected to happen. I'm going to give you an example of somebody that I worked with over the summer. He was an elderly gentleman, and he had a fire. I think it was in his walls. It destroyed his whole house. And so he was displaced from his house. He was elderly. The years prior to this fire, he had experienced some financial hardship. And so maintenance of his house had gone onto the back burner, as well as home insurance. So he had no insurance for his home. He also had to give up his car because he could no longer afford his car. So here was this elderly gentleman whose home was not livable, and he did not have the money to repair it. He was immediately connected with spiritual care with the firefighters in the community that were helping him. Red Cross was involved in the case. The gentleman had no resources, and so Red Cross jumped in, and a DAT worker got him connected with housing and food and basic needs. And they called in disaster mental health, and I got assigned the case. This gentleman's hope and optimism was absolutely remarkable. In spite of his tremendous loss, having no insurance, having no what seemed to be natural resources, he was still able to find positivity, gratitude, appreciation for his bicycle. In fact, he was so remarkable that the spiritual care provider through the fire department asked the local news station to do a human interest story on him. And yes, he got money and donations, but the most amazing thing that he got was a reconnection with a sister that he hadn't seen in decades. And they reconnected, and she became a resource for him. And it was his hopefulness and outlook that allowed that to happen. So I think I will always remember that story because it does give a great example of how when you can manage that hopefulness, that the unexpected can happen. All right, so here we have taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself might be the most important thing. So it's number 10, and it's number 10 because if you only remember one thing, remember this last thing. Taking care of yourself allows you to take care of others. We probably all have routines of wellness or self-care, exercise, eating right, doing things like journaling, belonging to our book clubs. All of these things allow us to have a rich, fulfilled life where we maintain our balance. These things allow us to have a very robust window of tolerance. They are all very important. Taking care of yourself during a disaster is something that is a little bit different. It might not be feasible for you to go on a run or to exercise if the air is full of smoke. You might not have the energy to go to your book club. So what does taking care of yourself look like in disaster, in an emergency? It takes very little energy, and there are things that you can do even when you are with people, even when you are in conversation with someone, to take care of yourself. Things as simple as taking deep breaths. Oftentimes when people get stressed or overwhelmed, they will take very shallow breaths, and this will actually make people feel more overwhelmed and more anxious. So I will sometimes myself take deep breaths if I'm noticing that I am getting overwhelmed with a situation. But it's also very common that when I'm talking to someone and I notice that they have a very rapid pace of speaking and very shallow breaths, that I might find an organic way of saying, can we just take some deep breaths together, and give them some education on why it is important to take deep breaths. I often will give people a visual around taking deep breaths. So if you are somebody that wants a little guide, how do I know if a breath is deep or if a breath is shallow? With a deep breath, your chest and your stomach is going to rise and fall. You can breathe in as if you are smelling roses, and you can exhale as if you are blowing out candles. That's a pretty good guide for deep breaths. Helping someone to do 3 deep breaths can have a surprisingly tremendous impact on their well-being and helping people to get a little bit more present in a situation. Okay, so I just want to stay here just for one moment. We went through 10 different ways in which the Red Cross has identified resilience. Those 10 ways are good whether you are a first responder, somebody who goes out to help support the aftermath of an emergency, or somebody who is themselves being impacted by an emergency. So I hope that you found some skills in there, some resilient skills that you currently use and that you can build upon, you can think of as resilience and purposefully use them in times of stress and crisis. And maybe you learned 1 or 2 that you didn't think of as resilience, or 1 or 2 that you want to build on. Okay, so I'm now going to move into that fight, flight, or freeze, that stress response. So what is stress? So we all have that natural set point that I talked about, that window of tolerance. I'm going to talk a little bit about when we bump up to the top of that window of tolerance, or even when we get bumped out of that window of tolerance. What happens when we go into fight, flight, or freeze? It's a biological effect. We cannot control it. So again, it doesn't matter what your training is. It doesn't matter how many deployments you've been on. Your body is still going to go into fight, flight, or freeze. So just like when you eat food, you cannot control your body from not digesting that food. It is the same for fight, flight, or freeze. But what you can do is you can learn to recognize those stress responses that you have in yourself so that you can use some of the resilience that we just learned about and that you can teach others. Okay. So let me see here. So stress responses are unique. Every individual will have a different stress response. And to make things even more confusing, one person might have a different stress response to the exact same situation, but it's under different conditions or circumstances. So we respond the way we respond, and all sorts of things impact that. Things like our age, our gender, whether we're married, whether we're single, the nature of the crisis, even how tired we are when the situation occurs. We also will have a very different response to natural disasters versus man-made events. And the type of experience that we have actually impacts other things, which impacts other stress response. So it's a little bit of a ripple effect. It's like dominoes toppling over. For instance, people tend to respond worse during disasters that happen in the evening. But in the evening, families are typically together. And so that reduces stress after the disaster. Whereas people tend to respond better to disasters that happen during the day. But during the day, you might not be with your family. And so it could result in additional distress after the emergency because family members might be separated. So many things go into how you will respond to two different situations. Right. Our individual stress reactions are unique, just like our stress responses are unique. But every single part of our functioning is impacted. So part of what I invite you to do is to notice what happens to your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors as that stress response goes into effect. Because by knowing when you are going into a stress response, you can take care of yourself. These things you can also teach to people that are going through a disaster. And oftentimes people will find it normalizing and comforting to know this type of information. Knowing this information can also help you to understand what somebody is going through. So somebody who typically might be very resilient might not be very resilient immediately following a crisis. Somebody might have unusual behaviors, and it might be directly a response to the fight, flight, or freeze. So our feelings, they might get hyper-focused on fear or hopelessness. People might experience terror. Other people might experience nothing and feel a numbness. When people have hyper-focused feelings, it's often a good indication that they are in a fight, flight, or freeze response. And again, those feelings can be any feeling, but the typical ones are fear, hopelessness, overwhelm, or numbness. People's thoughts can get very constricted. People can have a hyper focus on blaming or being forgetful. People might have lower self-esteem, or they might get a sense of blaming. But thoughts and thought processes might get impacted. People's ability to problem solve is probably impaired right after a crisis. And you wouldn't want to problem solve with somebody except for when it was absolutely needed until a little time has been since the disaster. So somebody can have opportunity to have that initial response and start to settle their body and these effects. People will often experience tremendous physical fatigue. They might have changes in their sleep and in their eating. I will often educate people to this. Again, it is normalizing when we educate people to these different physical responses. And in doing that, people can often start to problem solve themselves. It is also very validating to give people permission, and they can give themselves permission, that knowing that disasters often come with fatigue, that they can give themselves that permission to sleep extra if they need it. Every human mind feels pleasure in doing good for another person. My way of saying thank you for the work that you're doing and for being here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section. So what can you do? This is how you can be here for another person. Here are specific ways that you can assist people. First, you can create a compassionate environment. One of the values of the Red Cross, and also something that is tremendously healing for people who are going through a disaster. How do you create a compassionate environment? You take interest in the person, you listen, you hear their unique story, and you move through trying to help support them, direct them to their natural resources, to their resilience, and where needed, provide them with resources and provide them with support. If they need something that they don't have immediate access to, if we can help them with that, that is a way that you can provide immediate assistance. You can offer positive coping. Again, during times of loss, offering people validation for what they're going through will often help them come up with their own coping. You can explore with them where they have gone through these situations before and what has been helpful. Nurture those experiences and help them to use those skills here. All right, here are some guidelines when you are doing those things. First, we are tolerant of differences. We know that people come through disasters and emergencies with their own unique backgrounds, their own unique culture, their own unique ethnicities. We treat everybody with respect and with dignity, with the way that they look, the way that they talk, and the way that they dress. Sometimes this means that people will ask for something and you don't readily understand why they might need that thing. It might be because in their culture, it is something that provides comfort. And so I'm always looking for ways to connect people with their values, with their views and beliefs. And if something is going to be helpful, just like that young girl that I mentioned earlier and her purple beanbag chair, it is something that might provide comfort for the person. We keep our boundaries. We keep our boundaries. In these sorts of situations, you will often hear things and people will often share their personal experiences with you. Keep their information private. Respect people's information. Sometimes you might feel like what you are doing is not enough. Sometimes you might feel like you want to do more, and that just being there is not providing the support or help. Know when you yourself need to get support. If you are helping in a large disaster, you might lose sight of how important and validating it can be to give somebody an opportunity to tell their story, to connect somebody with a compassionate conversation and connect them with resources and to connect them with loved ones. If you are really feeling like somebody needs additional support, there are places to get support and to find that out. Some place like the Red Cross with disaster mental health, or even the Rossmoor Counseling Center. And finally, taking care of yourself. Again, the common factor. We are the best tools during a disaster. One of the best ways that we keep our tool, ourselves, really honed and ready for a disaster is by having our routines of wellness, but also having routines of self-care during a time of disaster. So we talked about the deep breathing, but if that doesn't help, you can combine that with any number of things that help you or the other person to get present in the moment. It can be as simple as doing a little bounce on your feet. 3 deep breaths, bouncing on your feet and doing a little self-talk. It might even be, I got this, will help you to get present. And by you taking care of yourself, it helps you to run the marathon that a disaster often requires. We typically can get through the short sprints of distress, but it's that marathon, it's the taking care of ourselves that allow us to do that marathon. I'm going to go over this one because I know that we're running up on time at this point. Here are some actions that you can take. Observe and be aware of what's going on around you and helping those people that are having a challenging time because maybe they're in a fight, flight, or freeze mode, to observe and be aware as well. For some people, when they're in fight, flight, or freeze, they might get hyper focused and they might not be able to take in the full environment visually. So we can help people with that. We can direct people if there's a safe place for them to go, or a place to get food or other resources. Don't assume that people see those things. Verbally tell them and make sure that they see them by pointing them out and you watching that they are looking at those things. Make connections. Connect people straight away. Oftentimes with disasters, Red Cross is going to mobilize quickly, as is Rossmoor and other resources. Make connections for people, not with just the things that can resource them with getting their needs met, but also with their communities. If family members have been separated, try to get them back together. Help people to feel comfortable and at ease, and be calm and compassionate. Introducing yourself goes a long way. Telling people where you're at and that you want to help and that you're here to help can be very assuring to people. Validating what people are going through can be very comforting. We can assist people with basic needs. And again, a basic need might be something that you might not think of as a basic need. And so make sure that we are taking all requests into consideration. And how we really know what people need is because we listen to them. Listen to people compassionately and with kindness. When you are with somebody, only be with that one person. We can only do one thing at a time. If we are responding to a disaster, it takes many, many hands to be able to address all the needs. But ultimately, we are one person. And so when we are doing that one thing, to be present in doing that one thing. So give realistic reassurance. We don't want to give people false hope. We don't want to say things to them like everything is going to be okay, but accurately reflecting what they're going through. Saying to people, this is a very challenging time, or I like how you are giving your daughter a hug. Those are reassuring statements. There are people here to help. So make sure that what you are saying is realistic, is accurate, and is reassuring. I went through some of this, but I do want to just talk a little bit about ending the conversation. When you are stopping your conversation with somebody, make sure you let them know that it is ending. You want to say goodbye. You want to make sure that they know where they can get reconnected with others that can be helpful. So make sure that you close the conversation. So before you go in and help with a disaster, think through your strategies. What resources are you going to use? How are you going to methodically and purposefully go about your work, the tasks that you are called upon to help keep yourself as strong as possible, to tend to yourself, but then also tend to others? Take the time that you need to get oriented to the resources that are available. You need to know where you can take care of yourself, where you can have a few moments of quiet. You also need to know where you are directing people, what the scope of what you are expected to do is, and who your support people are. So take a moment for yourself to make sure that you are fully oriented to get ready. Half of knowledge is knowing where to get it. We live in the Bay Area and there is lots of resources available to us. The Red Cross website is filled with resources and information. More and more of our training is going online. County mental health and mental health services are plentiful in the Bay Area, and we have plenty of people like the Red Cross, CERT, EPO that are ready for emergencies. And here are some specific referrals. You can suggest people go to their regular healthcare provider. Your Rossmoor Counseling Center is a fantastic resource. Here is both the phone number and the website. NAMI, it stands for the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they operate a warm line that is a phone number that people can call who are not in a crisis, but are in distress to get support. And then we have our Contra Costa crisis line. Both the warm line and the crisis line are 24/7 resources. So thank you very much.
Cindy, I want to thank you for an amazing presentation, very helpful. If I had to sum it up, I would say that your information connected to Briana's information on mental health disaster work gives us some real skills and some real ideas on how to preserve and encourage agency. As a helper, I have control over some things in a disaster and other things I have no control over. But I do have agency over some things. And if we can be here for our neighbors, for the folks we in our entries and on our streets that we're responsible for in terms of the EPO mission, then we can help them reestablish and encourage their own sense of agency in the middle of a area-wide, major disaster. This has been phenomenal. I want to thank you both, and both of you exhibit what I think is the best in disaster mental health. You obviously have mirror neurons, lots of empathy for the folks you're trying to help, be they helpers or be they our neighbors, our residents of Rossmoor. I deeply appreciate it. We are going to go now to our questions. And before we do that, I want to just introduce Sharon Meckenstock. She is EPO's new designated director for mental health. She's here, and if there are questions directed to her, Sharon is happy to answer them. She has years of experience in public mental health. She has 11 years at Tulare County Mental Health, San Pablo Rape Crisis Center, and Contra Costa County's Public Guardian Program. Sharon knows a few things about resiliency. So, Christine, do we have any questions?
We do have a few questions. Thanks, Fran, and thanks to the panelists. This is so important to know about the resource of Red Cross. And one thing that I picked up is you can donate to the Red Cross and help these services continue. Not just blood, but money too, as well as time. So a couple questions. There are a number of questions. People have said this was a great presentation, and thanks so much for all the strategies. Recognizing that you're talking to coordinators who are probably going to be the first people that interact with our residents during an emergency, are there any specific trainings that Red Cross offers that would help coordinators? You gave a lot of good resources, but practice makes perfect or near perfect. So any sort of trainings that you have that could be useful to coordinators specifically? And that's to Briana or Cindy.
So thank you very much for that question. And I love the forethought and getting ready for a disaster. This talk was largely taken from the skills that are in psychological first aid. That is a course that the Red Cross teaches. I believe, Briana probably knows better, I believe at this point it is online, and that will allow you to get more familiar with these concepts. The more you are able to care for yourself, the more you're able to care for others. These skills allow you not only to manage the immediate disaster, but it also will help with the aftermath. It also will help reduce the amount of stress response and PTSD that you and other people experience from a disaster. So recognizing that the skills of providing the help are very important in how you organize that. Psychological first aid helps us get ready as individuals and brings our most resilient self to the situation.
Christine,
Thank you, Cindy. Go ahead.
Christine, I will send you a link to that class that anybody can go on.
Send it also to me, Briana, and
I will.
We'll make sure it gets on our website.
Okay.
For our coordinators. Great.
Perfect. Cindy, you mentioned the personal psychological boundaries. That's something that's really important here, because even on a good day, there are a lot of people in Rossmoor who have a lot of needs that they sometimes can't deal with. And EPO coordinators sometimes end up stepping into that role and stepping until you really feel like you're the personal assistant for someone. So can you define what personal psychological boundary is, and maybe some strategies that some of our coordinators need to have to make sure that they don't become the personal assistants for 92 people?
Such a great question. That pull to keep stepping is great. Working with people in need is very rewarding, and needs are tremendous. So needs can feel like they are never ending. And it can be very hard if you can help somebody to not be able to help them. So I would say the personal psychological boundaries, it starts before you ever go in and offer support. It starts today. It is important that you know the purpose, the boundaries of what it is that you are doing. The work of a disaster requires everybody to do their part, and to make sure that you are aware of your part, where your job starts and where your job ends, can help you to keep those boundaries. I often experience this when I get called into a case, is knowing when to exit the case. Oftentimes, people's needs extend far beyond the needs of addressing a disaster. And so knowing when to resource somebody and connect them back to their natural supports and to politely exit is the role of what I am supposed to be doing. And so although I may need to call a colleague because it doesn't feel nice to leave somebody when they're still in need, that's what needs to happen, unless I would be stepping. Responding to a disaster is running a marathon. It is not sprinting, and it's not running more than a marathon. We each have our mile that we run. So know your mile, know what it is that you are doing, recognize that, and be able to step out when you need it.
And last of all, I mean, I think that's great, because boundaries are critical to do anything, to be effective. And as you said, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. So that's important for the coordinators here in Rossmoor to recognize. Are there any sort of tip or summary sheets available? Here in Rossmoor, we like to have little cheat sheets for everything. So we don't have to try to remember everything because sometimes memory fails us. But do you have any checklists or tip sheets that you could provide to us that would help a coordinator in an emergency?
Yes, I can pull some of the slides that are summary slides, including that last one that provides resources. Those can be pulled out and used.
That would be great.
And I also invite people that as you use them as a summary sheet, you can make your own notes on them. And so you can personalize them to what's going to help you the most. And that way you have it right there when you get called upon.
Great. The last question that I've had, and I've had a few of these, and it's to Colene. And we got people who want to give blood, but some of them can't find a way to do it online. You've provided a phone number, which I've put in the chat session. Any other suggestions, Colene, if they're not able to negotiate the web page or for some reason they can't figure it out?
You're free to call me anytime, and I will definitely get you on the list. And I did just go on to that website, and they're correct. The February 12th one is not on there right now, but I will get the contact our person, and she'll get it on there within the next few days. But
I did to recall today also that our newest community partner is Channel 28 and George Ivanov. So he will edit the program. Harris will edit our side of the program for our two modalities, and we'll get this message out to the broader community. Thank you all. What a wonderful, amazing presentation. I used to teach college. My students will tell you I'm a hard grader. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much.